On Job, it's kind of funny because back years ago when we had the young adult class, we got halfway through Job. And the people who were in that class keep giving me a hard time about starting the class again. And can we finish Job? Because we're all on pins and needles and we don't know what happened to Job. And we're just standing around waiting. So maybe one of these days we'll do that. But so you got the Reader's Digest version today, guys. But Job chapter 38, and I want to kind of finish this up. I went through that message really quick this morning. Job is such a fascinating chapter. I mean, they all are, but Job, it gives us an insight like really no other chapter into kind of what God's doing and not necessarily what he's doing overall, but it just really shows us that as we say, you know, God is God and we are not. And he's the one, and I loved Pete's devotional about, you know what, I'm okay when Pete gets into science and all this as long as he doesn't go too deep into that pool, because if he goes too deep, it's just, yeah, I'm gone. And so the idea that God, and when you look in your universe, okay, our universe, we can see God's real strength and who he is and how he created the universe. And so verse 38, it gets down, or chapter 38. I didn't give you any of these verses, guys. So Job chapter 38, I'm just going to read a couple of verses because we're going to get down to verse 6. That's kind of my favorite verse here in this chapter a little bit. Verse 38, chapter 38, verse 1. Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, "Who is this that darkeneth counsel by words without knowledge?" So he gets Job. I can't even imagine. Job is a person who wants to have an audience with God. I get it. His friends are hounding him ruthlessly, and they're wrong the whole time. So he wants to be vindicated, and he wants to be shown that he is not the man they say he is. And so he gets a counsel with God. How many of us really want to have that counsel with God? Any of us really want to sit across the table from him? Darkeneth counsel by words without knowledge. And then he goes into it, and God says, "Gird up now thy loins like a man, for I will demand of thee, and answer thou me." Any of you ever sit across the table from your dad at one time or another? Yeah, it was really hard answering my dad at times. And now you're standing across from God, and he says, "Where wast thou when I laid the foundation of the earth? Declare me." Tell it if you have understanding. I mean, first question out of the bat, it's over. All right? And he says, "Who hath laid the measures thereof, if thou knows? Or who hath stretched the line upon it?" And then verse 6. I love this verse. "Whereupon are the foundations thereof fastened?" I don't know about you, but when I think of foundation, I think that's the fastening point. Right? The foundation of my house is the fastening point. It holds my house up. Yes, it goes into rock. But God says, "Whereupon are where are the foundations fastened?" Do you know about that? Where are the foundations fastened? Who fastened them, or who laid the cornerstone? Now, we all know Christ is the cornerstone. But God's asking Job, he's saying, okay, so I like watching, National Geographic puts out some amazing documentaries, right? I don't always believe what they have to say about the age of the earth, but be that as it may, their photography is amazing. And I saw one on locusts the other day, and that guy had to be walking in those locusts. That was awful. I don't know if I've explained how much I hate grasshoppers. But anyway, so they showed the seasons. They showed the tilt of the world, and it's kind of like what Pete was talking about. It's one little band, and it shows how our world tilts on an axis. It has to be exactly perfect for us to survive, and how it goes around the sun. And I'm looking, and they have, I don't know who was out in space that took all these pictures, but they're really good pictures out there. And so they have the earth on the axis, and it's going around the sun, and I look at that, and I always think, who's holding it there? It's just out in space. I've seen enough space movies to know that if you move out in space, you just keep going straight, I think, right? And you see those space movies that anything touches, if it rotates, you're just all kinds of gone. And here our earth rotates, and it just goes. Who's holding it there? That blows me away. That I look at that, and it just, I can look at that, and God is asking Job, hey, do you know how that works? Do you know how that stays there? Come on, you wanted counsel. And Job has no idea. He has no clue. Or you go over, there's just this, read chapter 38 one of these times. Or verse 18, it says, hast thou perceived the breadth of the earth? Declare it if you know it all. Do you know how wide the earth is? Do you know how deep it is? Do you know any of this stuff? And he goes on, he says, do you know who stopped the ocean? He talks about snow. And he talks about all this stuff that happens in the earth, and he's questioning Job. He says, do you know about all this stuff? Come on, tell me about it. Here's your chance. Tell me about it. And it's just, it's God not answering Job's questions because he doesn't need to. And he doesn't need to answer our questions. The New Testament says that the earth declares his handiwork, declares his firmament, declares that he is the creator, that we are without excuse because the world shows that there is a creator. And so we look at Job, and I feel for Job when I read it because Job did nothing wrong, and this is going on in his life, but the true reality is the only innocent one was Jesus Christ. He's the only one that suffered for no reason at all except our sins. And so when Job gets down to this, and they're sitting across I look at it as sitting across the table, don't know that they were, but it's sitting across the table from each other, and they're having a conversation where Job's not converting very much, but God is, and he's asking them a question. He goes, do you know who fastened the foundation? Well, let me ask you, do you know who fastened the foundation? I do. It's God. I don't know how he did it. There's no way I can question God. Because you see, in all of Job, God had a purpose. And what we don't know is the purpose. Right? None of us know what the purpose is for our life. I don't know the purpose for Pete getting cancer. I don't know the purpose for Pam getting cancer. I just know that God had a purpose in all of it. And if it's nothing more than to witness to somebody we don't know about, then our job is to go through those trials and go through that suffering and go through that and be the witness that we need to be and be the person we need to be. Right? Because that's what God asks of us to do. And Pete's absolutely right when he says, well, some of our suffering is, well, you know, I'm suffering. I shouldn't have to because I'm better than that. Are we? Are we better than that? I mean, if we want to be servants of God, I say when suffering comes, we don't know the purpose. We don't question God. We just ask God to walk with us in it. And maybe he will show us why. And maybe he won't. But God says he has a purpose, and I have to believe that. Any thoughts? Any questions? I encourage you to study out the last half of Job. Figure out yourself what happens to him. So that's for my class. Yeah, John.
Last week you had commercials.
Oh.
And so when you were just going through chapter 38, this wonderful chapter, I kept thinking of the movie where Jack Nicholson plays the colonel, and Tom Cruise is the lawyer, and he says, I want the truth, and he says, you can't
Handle the truth, yeah.
That's God.
Yeah, you can't handle the truth. And we couldn't. I don't think we could. So, like I said, when I was reading through this, I thought about the times when I did something and I knew Dad was coming home. My dad never spanked us or anything, but I don't know if you had one of those kind of dads, you know. You disappointed him, and that was brutal. So, all right, anybody else? Yes, sir.
Yeah, your message this morning touched on some memories gone past, remembering Aaron, and you're here for a purpose, is basically what you were saying. And although his life was short, it amazed me how many people he touched. You know, because during his funeral, this whole building and outside was
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what it's gonna be like when we get to heaven. But it would be nice to see the lives that you touched when you get there. And there are people there that are there because you touched them in some way, maybe his funeral or something, that touched somebody that we never
There was
know.
people overseas
Yeah,
that traveled here, went there and says, hey, we have a friend back in, is having some troubles. And we would get a card from them. And we
Amen.
remember you.
you
So
never know.
You'd be surprised, like you said, how big your influence becomes. So make the most of it.
Amen. Well, I can remember when Bob passed away. He worked with a lot of ungodly men in the construction business. It's just the nature of the beast. But this building was packed. And those people heard the word. And so we just pray it changes their lives. So we never know God's purpose. And I just pray that we would keep that in mind. That's why holding unforgiveness in our hearts and grudges and stuff just doesn't work. Because that's not God's purpose at all. So, good comments. Thanks, Rick. Anybody else? Yes.
When I first read this, I have pondered on a few hours. What I got was, these are all masonry terms. I spent all my life as a bricklayer, stonemason, and when I read this, we stretched the line, and we are talking about foundations. And I understand this probably different than anybody else because of the fact that the masonry terms are so explicit when we read them. We make our own foundations on this little sliver that we call earth. This is so moving to me that I have it highlighted, underlined, and it is absolutely excellent. And thank you, Brother Gary, for bringing it out.
Thanks, man. That's a God thing. All right, anybody else? All right, if not, then we will go into our business meeting. I will declare our church in their monthly business meeting.
You can trade money. How many Baptists is it? So,
Reading of the minutes.